Welcome to the Talegate Podcast with your host, Al Blanton. At Talegate, we celebrate the rich history of sports in the state of Alabama. So come with us as we relive great moments, great games, great players and coaches, and in the process, preserve memories for a lifetime. So we're here with Jonathan Sanford. It is Thursday, April 4th, 2024. We're here at the Toyota Center in downtown Houston. And tell me what room this is.
This is the Star dressing room.
The Star dressing room. So let's start out. How does one go from Jasper, Alabama to the Star dressing room at the Toyota Center being the PA announcer for the Houston Rockets?
Well, it takes a crazy journey, right? I mean, I really don't know to put that in a better terminology, but, growing up, I was a huge fan of the NBA. I can still remember this day sitting out in the backyard. I lived over in West Jasper, which I'm sure you know quite well. And I remember sitting in my backyard, even when we were having campouts. Like, I would always want to have a little TV or something to watch the NBA games on, the ones that we could pick up whenever they were national. And it was during the Jordan heyday when you had such a big emphasis on NBA basketball in this country, and whether it was the Bulls and the Lakers, or I remember one night sitting under the stars watching a Phoenix Suns and Seattle Supersonics. Remember Seattle Supersonics? Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Watching a playoff game between them, you had Charles Barkley on that Phoenix team, Kevin Johnson, Dan Marley. I mean, you were a basketball player. You know how special those years were. And I kept hearing the guy in the arena, in the background. You had Marv Albert on the TV play-by-play, but I kept hearing this guy in the background. I thought, wow, that guy sounds really cool, his voice. And whenever the Bulls were in the playoffs, you had an announcer there by the name of Ray Clay. And whenever they would show on NBC the intros of the players, Ray Clay was the voice you heard. And immediately when I heard him, I was like, I want to do that one day. But growing up in Jasper, Alabama, it was like.
And you're about how old, probably?
Let's see, I would have been, this would have been
16 or 17?
A little bit before that, maybe. A little bit before that. But I thought, I'm here in Alabama. There's no NBA team here in the state.
Never gonna be.
It's never gonna happen. Like it seemed like a far-fetched, dream that I could ever be in this position where I grew up. I thought maybe, and I'm a big Alabama fan, so I thought, man, one day I'll be the voice of Alabama basketball or Alabama football in the stadium or in, Coleman Coliseum. That was kind of where I saw my dream going. But still, I always held out this thought that one day maybe I would get that opportunity. And in 2011, my wife and I made the move to Austin, Texas, where she grew up. And that's how I ended up with the San Antonio Spurs. And I was fortunate. I was one of 85 people to apply for that job and made it all the way down to the Final Four. In fact, there's a Facebook post on my feed from that time period where my wife and my kids were at the arena there in San Antonio for the first time when I was actually trying out. And I just thought, well, this is going to be the one shot. And it still seemed pretty far-fetched because I knew the experience that the other guys had that were applying for the job, and all I had ever done was high school basketball and college basketball. Never had I been a part of any NBA organization. And some of those guys had. So I thought, this is my one chance to be able to enjoy this experience, and then I'll, go about my life. But I was fortunate enough that they chose me, and I was in San Antonio during the championship of 2014, an NBA championship, when you had Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, Tim Duncan, which are the big three for that team for many, many years. And then in 2018, moved here to Houston, and this job was presented to me a few years ago, and really came out of nowhere. I got a phone call one night asking me to come down here to the arena and meet with them, and I walked in through the doors, the security entrance you came through tonight, right? And they took me down to the floor and through the player tunnel. And when I walked into the arena, they had the scoreboard, the big scoreboard you see there. They had it lowered all the way to the floor. And they had a little section of the scoring table set up. And they said, John, we're going to put this game on the screen. We want you to call it as if you were the Rockets announcer. So I did, and I had nothing to lose because I didn't know what they were looking at. This was during the COVID time.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, they're needing a backup, right?
Right.
And they called me up and said, no, we want you to be the guy.
Yeah.
And I think the first thing, in fact, Natalie, who you just met a few moments ago, was standing by me there at the table. She's the one that actually called me. And she said, you're the guy. And that's big news.
Yeah.
I didn't expect that. And so I had to talk to my family and talk to my church about it because I'm a full-time minister, counselor. So, I needed to talk to my church family about it because this was going to be a big undertaking. And, of course, they gave me their blessing. My family gave me their blessing, and then was able to make the move. So it's just a very long journey, and there are so many steps along the way where I could see the hand of God in putting me where I needed to be at the right time, meeting my wife, having a family, children, ending up in Austin at the right time, moving here to Houston. And a little side part of that, in 2016, my wife was diagnosed with cancer and was battling cancer at the time. And in 2018, part of that decision process to move here to Houston is because this place has the best cancer center in the world, in my opinion. And I knew that she would be here in case something were to come back with that cancer. So felt like God's hand was in moving us here to Houston. But I thought at that point, when I gave up the Spurs job to move here, I thought that's it for me in the NBA. I'm never going to get that opportunity again. But hey, family's most important right now. I mean, you got to put your wife and the kids first. So I did that thinking it was over. And then when the Rockets came and offered me the opportunity to do the same thing here I'd done in San Antonio, I kind of thought it was kind of like if the announcer for the Alabama Crimson Tide end up at Auburn,
right?
Because the Rockets and the Spurs are rivals, but they're respectable rivals, And so that was one of the first questions: are you sure? I was a Spurs guy. Are you sure? So, no, there's respect there. The fans were incredible. The Spurs fans understood that I didn't leave the Spurs to come to the Rockets because I left because of family situation. So Spurs fans were very understanding. Rockets fans were gladly accepting of me and have been. So that's how I ended up here.
Let's back up, and I've got two questions. I want to kind of get a little bit more details on. Now, you graduated in '95, and then take me through, '95 to when you got the job with the Spurs. And the second part of that question is, how did you even find out about the tryouts for the PA announcers for the Spurs? Was that something that was posted, or so? How did you tell me about your journey?
It's a little bit of a long story, but I'll tell you.
It's okay, yeah.
So first of all, graduated Walker High School, now Jasper High School, in 1995. Went to Jacksonville State University.
Okay.
Had a vocal scholarship there and a music scholarship. Then ended up going up to Florence, Alabama, to Heritage Christian University.
Okay.
And because I wanted to be a minister. And then I met my wife. She was stationed in Fort Lee, Virginia. We had a connection. Her uncle was a preacher in Walker County for many years. So he kind of helped to introduce us. And she moved. She got a transfer from Fort Lee to Fort Rucker. This was in the summer of 2002. So between the 95 period when I graduated, went to college, then met my wife in 2002, married in January 4th of 2003, and immediately after we found out we were having our first baby, Haley, we moved to Houston originally in 2003, and I was ministering here in Houston. Then my wife got a job offer in Austin. You remember the show Friday Night Lights? I don't know if you watched it or not.
Yeah, I did.
The end of that show.
Binge watched it.
The end of that series, he's put in a position where his wife has followed him wherever he has been a coach, right? Yeah. My wife had followed me wherever I had been a minister, preacher, counselor. And she got a job offer in Austin, and that's where her family's at. So I said, you know what, babe? I know I'm giving up my opportunity, but I feel like, you've got an opportunity that she couldn't turn. She's a music teacher, and it was a great opportunity for her. So I gave up my ministry opportunity here in Houston to move to Austin, having nothing there. I had nothing set up. So when I got there, I didn't have a church to minister at right away. And I said, well, I got to do something. I'm not just going to sit around and be bored. And so I went down to Austin Independent School District. And I said, hey, I realize y'all got a ton of high schools here. Is there an opportunity I can announce here, football or basketball? And they said, well, you'll have to, turn in an application, go through all the background checks and all that. I said, sure, I'll do that. So it was a Thursday. I went, turned everything in that Thursday afternoon. I got a phone call about 5 o'clock, 4:30 or 5 o'clock, from a guy by the name of Wade Johnston, who was one of the ADs there at Austin Independent School District. He said, hey, our guy who announces our track and field area meet has gotten sick. Is it any possible way you could come up to this stadium and announce for us for this area track and field meet? I said, sure, let me see if I can grab my father-in-law. He'll be my spotter. And so we did. We headed up there, announced that track and field meet that night. We got done. I was walking down the stadium steps, and Wade was standing at the bottom. He said, Jonathan, I tell you what, man, you're the best announcer I've ever heard. He said, I'm going to talk to the other ADs, and we're going to have to find a way to get you in announcing for us.
Had you done it before?
Oh, yeah, I've been doing it since wherever I've been as a minister. I always found a way to get involved in local high school.
Okay. What was your first high school? What was your first announcing job?
It was actually doing color, filling in with the radio broadcast for Viking football.
Okay.
So
you got your start in Jasper.
Yeah, I got my start in Jasper.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
That's okay. So he said, I'm going to call the other athletic directors and tell them we need to hire you immediately. Well, I just thought, thanks, man, I appreciate it. I wouldn't expect them to really do that. But he did. He went home that night and called Lynn Poole, who was the head athletic director. And so Lynn calls me up and says, hey, we've got our softball state playoffs starting, and we want to know if you'd announce a game for us. I said, sure. I go to announce a high school playoff game between one of the Austin schools and one of the Dripping Springs schools. And the head of the UIL, that's the University Interscholastic League. It's kind of like the HSAA of Alabama High School Athletic Association, but this is called University Interscholastic League here in Texas. It governs all high school sports and fine arts. That day, the principal at Dripping Springs, Dr. Laura Cousins, was there at the game, and she heard me announce, and she called her husband up, I take it back. Dr. Laura Cousins, she was the principal at Dripping Springs. She called her husband up, Dr. Mark Cousins, who was the head of the UIL at that time, and she said, listen to this. And she held her phone up. She said, we need to get this guy announcing our state softball championships. A few days later, I got a phone call from Lynn Poole, and she said, hey, UIL wants to know if they can contact you about announcing their state championships. And I said, sure, give them mine. They called me up. So at the end of May, and this was just 6-8 months after we moved to Austin, they called me up. I'm sitting in Red and Charlie McCombs Field at the University of Texas, announcing the high school state championships, 1A through 6A here in the state of Texas. That day, a guy walks into the booth, and everybody is congratulating him because he's been the backup announcer for the San Antonio Spurs for a number of years. Not their main guy, but the guy who would fill in case there was ever an issue. He was going to be announcing that tournament with me. So they were congratulating him because the main guy for the Spurs had just announced that day he was stepping down. So I looked at him and I was like, wow, man, congratulations, Barry. That's his name was Barry Thomas. So Barry, that's been my dream since I was a little kid. Congratulations. And I just kind of wiped it from my mind. I got asked to announce the World Championships for high school football, or not high school, but U18, U18 and under high school football players play against players from all over the world in American-style football in June of that same year, and this was 2012. And I walked in there for a pre-meeting. We were getting ready to get things started, and a guy walks in by the name of Mike Plummer. And I introduced myself. We talked. I said, "What do you do for a living?" And Mike said, "Well, I'm one of the game ops managers with the San Antonio Spurs." And I said, "Oh, that's cool. I just met your new announcer a few weeks ago." And he goes, "Well, that's not official yet. That job is still open. And we're taking applications." And I was like, "Oh, okay." We got done with the first day of that World Championships, and he came up to me and said, "I want you to do me a favor." He said, "I want you to go online tonight, and I want you to apply for the Spurs job." He said, your voice, you've got to do that." And I said, "Okay." So I go home.
That sent a tingle up your spine?
Yeah, it did, really. I mean, I went home that night, though, Al, and I looked at the application, and it said you had to have 3 to 4 years NBA experience. Well, guess what? You know how much I had? 0.
Yeah.
And so I didn't fill it out. I went back the next day, and Mike goes, "Did you fill out that application?" I said, "Well, no, Mike." I said, "It says I need to have 3 to 4 years NBA." He goes, "Don't worry about that. You need to fill that out and send it in today." So I went home that night, I filled it out. At the bottom, it said, "You need to submit a demo." Well, when you've been announcing high school sports and some small college stuff, you don't have a great demo reel that you can send in to your announcer. So I didn't submit one. I just submitted the application without the demo, and my wife got mad. She was like, "Listen, Jonathan, you've been dreaming about this your whole life. Why don't you go ahead?" I said, "Jenny, I don't have a good demo." But it hit me. I thought, well, here's what I'll do. So I went into my studio, and I took a Spurs playoff game from a few years back, and I looked at the players, and I set up music, and I did the player intros as if I were the Spurs announcer. And I sent that in, and I told my wife that. I sent it in, I wiped it from my mind, do not bring it up again. Because I didn't want to get my hopes up.
Yeah.
Because I knew that this guy had been with him. I thought, he's going to get the job. And they called me up, and a few weeks later, it was like at 8 o'clock in the morning, the phone rings, and my wife and I answered, and he says, "Hey, just want to let you know," it was Mike. He said, "We just played your demo for the people, decision makers here in the arena, and it's a game changer. And we want you to come down and meet with us and announce a game for us."
And this is the guy that had been second and was in line. The same guy called you?
No, this was Mike Plummer. This was the guy that I had just met prior at the World Championship. So it came down to myself, that guy, Barry Tom, and 2 other local individuals. And I was fortunate enough to get the job.
Yeah.
And it just it was a whirlwind, really and truly, from the time we moved to Austin to the time when I was eventually part of the Spurs organization.
Out of all the people that have walked out on the court, whether that be in San Antonio or Houston, who have you been blown away with? That, man, there's so and so. I can't believe I'm 5 feet from.
Okay,
give me 2 or 3. Yeah.
Okay, quick story. So we were playing the Knicks during the 2014 season, and I'm sitting there at the table, and this older gentleman, white-haired, short, comes and sits down on the table in front where the players are shooting around. Kind of what you saw just a few moments ago. There's nobody else in the arena but just the players, and he turns around. And we speak to one another, and I said, "My name is Jonathan." He said, "My name is Paul." And we just continued conversation. I said, "Paul, what do you do for a living?" He goes, "I'm in music." I said, "Oh, okay, cool, man. I love music. My wife's a musician. I sang and played an instrument in my life. I love music as well." We talked for a good 10, 15 minutes. He walks away. Security walks up and says, "Do you realize who you were just talking to for the last 20 minutes?" I said, "No." He said his name was Paul, but I never asked him his last name. It was Paul Simon.
Oh, wow.
But he just didn't look like the Paul Simon I've seen on album covers.
Yeah.
Right? This was Paul Simon a little later in life. You know, that's one of my favorite ones because I've always thought about what that guy was thinking.
Yeah.
With me in that position and acting, you know, like, hey, I'm in music too, you know.
Was he a nice guy?
It was very, very nice, very cordial. I've had moments like Selena Gomez. For my kids, those are the ones that matter to them, right?
Right, sure.
You know, introing Selena Gomez, you know, during the height of her popularity back in like 2016. Like my kids still to this day, it's one of the more viral videos that I have out there of me announcing and introducing Selena Gomez to the crowd. They love that.
What about player-wise?
For me, the number one is always going to be Kobe Bryant. I had an opportunity to be part of a retirement celebration with Kobe Bryant during his final season when he came to San Antonio, and I received word from his people that they really enjoyed my introduction of him and the video that the San Antonio Spurs at that point put together for him. That's always going to be number one for me. Kobe Bryant, whenever we would play him in San Antonio before his retirement, there was always this part of me that just felt like, hey, I remember being in a gym in Florence, Alabama, pretending that I was introing Kobe Bryant. This would have been 2000, right on 2000. I remember being in a gym up there, playing basketball, taking a break, and, you know, just pretending like, you know, that I was announcing Kobe Bryant. And then to be able to sit in that chair and actually intro him was a pretty surreal moment.
Yeah. You know, when you think about dynasties, you think about the Celtics and the Lakers and then the Bulls and then obviously the Warriors' most recent dynasty.
Right.
But that Spurs dynasty
would have so tremendous, you know.
Would have stacked up against anybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And you look at the way they did it with the players. They did it with David Robinson, right? The Admiral is such a big figure in San Antonio. Tim Duncan, the big fundamental, as he was, you know, portrayed. One of the nicest guys that I've ever had the opportunity to be around, and as good of a player coach as I think you're ever going to see in the NBA. He was a coach on the floor that helped guys to grow. You talk about Kawhi Leonard that came along during that 2012, 2013, 2014 era of time, the 2014 championship. Without Tim Duncan's mentorship of Kawhi Leonard, I'm not sure that we're seeing the Kawhi Leonard of today. And then Manu and Tony, just that group of players to sustain for as many years as they did, to capture 5 championships during the course of time when we were all together, it is just remarkable.
What's different about this job than the Spurs job? You know, you said you can get used to this, but I mean, you know, I just walked in there a second ago and
it just blows you away.
It blows you away. But what's
so
different
the Spurs
between
way was very Coach Popovich, his finger is on everything, and he has a certain way he wants things done, from the announcing, the music, the presentation, the arena. I mean, he has a tried and true formula, right? He's won 5 championships,
right?
But the thing that's been so great about coming here to Houston is that I have been given creative freedom that I did not have before, to do some more things that I felt like would add to the presentation. And the staff here has been second to none. You talk about a Hall of Fame legacy. When you have Hakeem Olajuwon, I mean, just one of the greatest players of all time, and yet one of the nicest guys you're ever going to meet. When you've got a guy like that still a part of this organization, and his face, his scene, and it just, the feeling here in Houston, especially in this growth, because I came in right as they were starting to rebuild. James Harden had left. They had a an opportunity to draft a top player in the league and rebuild. And it's been some tough times. Here's the way I would contrast it. In the 2015-2016 season, I was 40-1 at home.
Mm-hmm.
I only had to announce one loss in that season in San Antonio. My first two seasons here in Houston, just to get one or two or three or four or five wins at home
Mm-hmm.
was a special feeling.
Mm-hmm.
But you knew that you were sowing the seeds
Mm-hmm.
of what will eventually be a dynasty in and of itself, an opportunity to grow something special here. And I'm on the ground floor,
Mm-hmm.
whereas in San Antonio, I wasn't on that ground floor. I came in at the height of their popularity,
Mm-hmm.
their final championship of that dynasty, right? So here, it's a different feel in that I'm part of this growth process. I get to see it from, we have a theme here this season called Liftoff, and it really is. It's all about seeing this rocket ship go from, the launch pad to wherever it's going to be by the end of this season and next season. And it's just been a different experience for me, but one that's been as enjoyable, if not more enjoyable, than what I had in San Antonio.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of that has to do with the people that I get to work with
Mm-hmm.
here. They're just fantastic.
Mm-hmm. When you think about you being creative in your job, what elements contribute to that? Do you talk to the players, or are you trying to think about what the fans are wanting? How do you sort of build your portfolio?
So I always
out
want
there?
to think about what fits the theme of the organization. Like, it's not about what's Jonathan's style.
Right.
That's never been my MO. It's never been about what Jonathan wants. It's, okay, what do the players want? What will help them and help this be the best home court advantage that you can possibly bring? And so you want to know from those players what fires them up.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to know from the fans, what is it that, and I have that's been one of the most enjoyable parts of this in Houston, is the connections to the fans. And I really wasn't big on social media in San Antonio, but since coming to Houston, I've gotten very involved in the social media aspect of my job and connecting with those fans, listening to them and know what they like to hear, and then trying to do things and tailor the calls in the game to be things that get them fired up.
Mm-hmm.
That's been a key for me in making that connection here.
Mm-hmm. Give me an example of something that you.
Well, the big one here in Houston is Rockets ball.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll hear this later on the night. Whenever there's a turnover, whenever the opposing team turns the ball over, I'll start out, it's Rockets ball. And it's super loud, and the crowd pops, after you do it. And that's one that gets the fans excited. The one that's really been cool for me, though, has been Rockets win. And if you're ever on my social media, I'll post these videos after every home Rockets win. I'll say, that's the final buzzer, the score. It's Rockets. And then I'll hold it out as long as I can and then win. And it's been a fun addition that people retweet and share and talk about. So that's fun.
Yeah. You mentioned your faith earlier, and you said God's got you here, and how do you see that sort of bearing out, in this job, and then also are you still doing ministry?
Yeah. So it was really cool because in Austin I had a church that I was ministering at eventually, and they were super supportive of me being the Spurs announcer. I was working with young people more at that point. And so the church, like, hey, our youth and family minister is the Spurs announcer. Mm-hmm. And so they kind of enjoyed that. But, I was in a preaching role here and still am. And so when you're kind of that main guy, you have a lot of responsibility at a church. And so my thought was, well, this church might be like, hey, we don't want you to take that opportunity. Mm-hmm. We want, to make sure all your focus is here. And so I went before the elders of the church and was like, hey, you got to tell me, what do you want? And they said, no, we know how much of a passion this is for you. And we know that your ministry isn't going to suffer because of this passion. Mm-hmm. And so that was a really cool deal for me, because they could have easily said no. Mm-hmm. And I would have said, okay, mm-hmm. I would have felt like it wasn't in the cards. But God's hand was in guiding me to the right church. that would be approving and accepting and be able to say, hey, it's a, we got this activity tonight, but Jonathan is downtown working. We'll do whatever we have to make that happen, which is a sacrifice that they've been willing to make.
I want to go back to the Spurs for just a second because I really, when I think about those teams and really the way the Spurs played ball in the mid, 2000s.
Beautiful game.
The ability to pass and move the ball, I've never seen an NBA team that move the ball the way they did. I mean, It was just incredible to watch.
That 2014 team is especially known for that. The beautiful game is what it was referred to as. There would be times, Al, from my seat at center court. I have the best seat in the house, right? I mean, you've seen it. I would see them pass out of a good shot to pass into a great shot. And you and I know that sometimes players are all about getting their shot. And it's almost a selfish tendency sometimes. I got to get my shots. But in San Antonio, the guys were of such a nature that they would be willing to pass out of a good shot because they knew another player would have a great shot. And watching that ball movement during the course of that season, I'll never forget, we played Miami about midway through that season. And we just blew them out at home. It was one of the best nights I'd had as a Spurs announcer. And it was all about watching that ball movement. And that was the moment that season where I thought, you know what, we can really do this. We can really win this championship. Because across the way, you had LeBron James, you had Dwayne Wade, you had Chris Bosh, Ray Allen. You had a group of superstars. We didn't have a bunch of superstars. We didn't have the highest names, most popular names in the league. We had Tim Duncan, Monty Ginobili, Tony Parker. We had guys like Kawhi Leonard that were just blossoming. We had guys that really were people that no one knew a lot about, like a Patty Mills. But they were guys who were willing to buy into the team concept so that at the end of the year they could celebrate that championship and it not be just about one player going above all the others. It was about 5 guys on the floor at one time doing everything they could to make the other player better.
And you can see it here with the Rockets that there's some building blocks.
Oh, yeah, because
it's coming.
Here's a big part of that.
Yeah.
Ime Udoka was with me in San Antonio for all those years. I left San Antonio the same time that he did. He went on to be an assistant coach and then a head coach with the Boston Celtics. Goes to the NBA Finals in his first year. To have him here in San Antonio and that concept of team and making each other better, we've seen the benefits of that throughout the season. We just got finished with an 11-game win streak in the month of March, the top team in the NBA for the month of March. And that would not be possible if it were just about me ball, guys being all about themselves. No, it's been about the team concept. And they've grown and they've learned. It takes time to learn that because not everybody buys into that overnight. But with Ime Udoka and that coaching staff here, I have a great feeling that we're going to see the benefits of that through the end of this season and the next season. And as long as they buy into that concept, I believe they have the opportunity to one day win an NBA championship.
You've got 5 minutes to tell your grandchild about your experiences here and in San Antonio. What do you say to them?
I was a small town boy who always had a dream of doing something bigger than myself. And the moment that you give up on that dream is the moment that you never have an opportunity to fulfill it. And if I could tell my grandchildren anything about my journey, it's that I never gave up on that dream. And it wasn't about just me. It was about having a wife who supported me, children who supported me. And I always say this, Al, it's not about who you know. I know you've probably heard that your whole life. It's not about who you know. It's about who's willing to say they know you. And when you build relationships with people and you're trustworthy, and they know that you're going to give your all in everything that you do for them, then when it comes time to speak on your behalf, they're going to be able to and be willing to speak for you. And for me, that's what's made my journey possible, is having good family, good faith, and good friends and good relationships that have gotten me, to this point in my life.
Mm-hmm. Do you sometimes just think, man, how incredible it is that I'm able to do this?
Every day that I walk into this arena, I always treat it as if it's my last.
Yeah.
I always treat it, every game, as if it's my last, because that's how special it is.
Yeah.
Every game is a one-game series to me. Because in this business, I mean, listen, there are so many people out there that would love to sit where I'm sitting.
Oh, absolutely.
And so I'm going to treat it with the most professionalism that I possibly can. Because, hey, I don't want to give up that seat. I feel blessed anytime I'm able to sit here and have my voice be heard, by 18,000 plus fans.
Yeah. And that's a wrap. Stay tuned for the next episode of the Talegate Podcast. And in the meantime, connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. We'll see you next time.